I used to believe that religion was simply about rituals, rules, and rigid practices. I'd been raised ticking boxes, praying 5 times, fasting in Ramadan, donating to charity, all the external behaviors that marked a religious person. But deep inside, I carried bitterness, arrogance, and judgment. I was following the structure, but missing the spirit. That all changed the day I met David. It was at a community event, a gathering meant to bridge gaps between faiths and cultures. I wasn't particularly excited, just curious. But then I heard David speak. He said something that struck me like lightning. Your character is your true religion. Rituals are the branches, but character is the root. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Step 1. Reflecting on what religion really means. I had spent so many years adhering to the rituals and structures of religion, ticking off every box to prove my faith. I prayed 5 times a day, observed fasting in Ramadan, gave charity, and attended religious gatherings. On the outside, I was doing everything right. But deep inside, I felt an emptiness, a disconnection. Something was missing. The actions felt like duties I was fulfilling, but they didn't bring the peace or transformation I had expected. It was as if I was caught in a loop of doing the right things, but failing to grasp the deeper purpose of it all. It was during a casual conversation with David that the shift began. I remember sitting at a small cafe, sipping coffee, with him casually observing my inner turmoil. I told him how I had followed the motions of religion for years, trying to live a righteous life, but had never felt truly connected. The disconnect had always been there, hidden beneath the surface of my outward actions. David listened carefully, nodding with understanding. Religion, he said slowly, isn't just about rituals or rules. It's about the heart. It's about transforming your character, not just your actions. I was intrigued. What do you mean? I asked. He smiled, leaning forward. Think about the core of your faith. Whether you are Muslim, Christian, or follow another tradition, at the heart of every belief system is one common principle: becoming a better version of yourself. True religion is not about ticking off rituals. It's about the internal transformation that comes from living those rituals with sincerity and love. David then shared a story from Islam about the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Before he received the divine revelation, people referred to him as Al-Amin, the trustworthy. Do you see? David asked. His character was the foundation of his faith, even before the message of Islam. He was known for his honesty, his compassion, and his ability to empathize with others. David continued, "This shows us that the essence of religion is not in performing rituals mechanically. It's in embodying the values those rituals are meant to cultivate. If you truly follow the values of your faith, truth, kindness, humility, patience, then the rituals will naturally be a reflection of that inner character. Without that, the rituals are just empty actions." I felt the weight of his words sink in. It was a revelation. Religion was never meant to be a checklist of behaviors. It was meant to shape the way we treat others, how we act when no one is watching, and how we respond in difficult moments. Later that evening, I reflected on my own life. I realized I had been so focused on what I was doing externally, prayers, fasting, charity, that I had overlooked the heart of these actions. The purpose was not just to perform them for the sake of appearance, but to cultivate a heart that was aligned with compassion, justice, and truth. I thought about the example of Jesus Christ, In Christianity, despite being the Son of God, he lived humbly, showing love and kindness to the least among society. He healed the sick, comforted the broken-hearted, and forgave those who wronged him. His life was a reflection of his character, and that's what made him a true embodiment of faith. His actions were not about fulfilling rules. They were a natural outpouring of the love he carried within. David's words echoed in my mind. Religion is about building character, not just following rituals. It's about embodying love, integrity, and truth in every action, no matter how small. I began to question myself more deeply. Who was I really? When no one was watching, did I act with the same sincerity? When I faced challenges, did I show the character my faith was meant to build in me? Was I just following rituals, or was I allowing them to transform me from the inside out? That night, I wrote in my journal, "Religion isn't what you do, it's who you become." Step 2. Embracing humility over holiness. In the next week, my conversation with David, I began to reflect on the idea of humility in faith. Before, I had always thought of holiness as the end goal. Holiness was something to strive for, a measure of piety that could be seen in one's actions. How much you prayed, how much you fasted, how much you gave. But this idea of holiness was often intertwined with an underlying pride, a sense of self-righteousness that didn't leave much room for growth. I was focused on appearing holy rather than becoming truly humble, and I realized I had it all wrong. David had once told me, "You can't be truly holy without first being humble." Holiness comes from the inside, and it begins with humility. I had to think about that statement. How many times had I looked down on others because I thought I was doing the right thing? How many times had I passed judgment on someone for not adhering to the same rituals or practices that I followed? I had worn my faith like a badge, using it to distance myself from others rather than to bring myself closer to them. One day, I found myself in a situation that put my humility to the test. I was at a gathering with a few friends, and one of them, an elderly janitor who worked at the building, had come by to clean the table. I noticed how he was moving slowly, his clothes worn, his back hunched from years of hard work. Without thinking, I snapped at him when he came too close to my bag, which was lying on the floor. I didn't realize how harsh my tone had been until I saw the surprise and hurt in his eyes. David's words echoed in my mind. Character is more than your actions. It's the way you treat those who can't do anything for you. I felt a deep shame. Here I was, so caught up in my own sense of self-importance that I had forgotten the essence of my faith: compassion, kindness, and humility. I had become so obsessed with how I appeared to others that I had lost sight of how I treated others, especially those who could offer me nothing in return. That night, I called David to talk about what had happened. "I made a mistake," I said. "I hurt someone just because I thought I was above them." David responded gently, "Humility is not about putting yourself down or thinking you're less than others. It's about recognizing the inherent worth of every human being, regardless of their status. True humility comes from seeing everyone not as beneath you, but as equal to you, deserving of respect and dignity." He shared a story from the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Do you know how the Prophet, peace be upon him, treated his companions? Even though he was the most respected person in Mecca, he would sit with the poor, the needy, and the marginalized. he would never make anyone feel small or inferior. When someone would ask him where he sat in a gathering, he would say, "I sit where the people sit." That struck me deeply. I realized that true humility wasn't about diminishing myself or thinking less of my accomplishments. It was about recognizing the value of others, seeing their humanity, and meeting them with respect, regardless of their station in life. Humility meant showing kindness without expecting recognition, and helping others without wanting anything in return. David then reminded me of a story from Christianity. Do you remember the moment when Jesus knelt to wash his disciples' feet? He asked. That act wasn't just about servitude. It was a radical display of humility. Despite being their leader, Jesus showed that greatness isn't measured by power or position, but by how you serve others. I had always admired that story, but now I understood it on a deeper level. Humility is the foundation of service. It's about lowering yourself, not in self-deprecation, but in recognizing that serving others is the highest form of respect. When we humble ourselves, we elevate others, and that is where true holiness lies. I began to incorporate this into my daily life. The next time I saw the janitor at the gathering, I approached him with a heartfelt apology. "I'm sorry for how I spoke to you earlier. That was disrespectful. Please forgive me." His face softened, and he smiled, assuring me there were no hard feelings. I realized then that humility wasn't just about grand gestures. It was in the little things, the everyday encounters, the moments when you choose to lift others up instead of putting them down. I made it a point to show more kindness, listen more attentively, and offer help whenever I could. Slowly but surely, I began to see a change within myself. I wasn't perfect, of course. I still struggled with moments of pride and ego, but I had a new understanding. Holiness could never be achieved without humility, and humility was the key to developing true character. It was no longer about performing rituals just to fulfill obligations. It was about living those rituals with a humble heart, with the intention of becoming a better person, not just for the sake of religion, but for the sake of humanity. David's wisdom had opened my eyes to a truth I had overlooked for so long. The character of a person is measured not by how much they perform religious duties, but by how humbly they walk among others. Step 3. Being just when it's hard. One day at work, I saw a colleague being blamed for a mistake I knew wasn't hers. I hesitated. Speaking up could cost me my stand-in. David's words echoed in my mind. If your faith doesn't make you brave, what good is it? So I spoke up. Later, he told me about a Jewish proverb. In a place where there are no men, strive to be a man. It wasn't about gender. It was about stepping up when no one else would. That moment didn't just earn me respect. It anchored me. But the lesson didn't end there. A few weeks later, that same colleague was up for a promotion, and I heard whispers that people were still holding that incident against her. Again, I had a choice: to stay silent or to speak truth again. I remembered another moment David had shared with me from Islamic tradition. During the time of Caliph Ali ibn Abi Talib, a case came before him involving a non-Muslim. Ali ruled in favor of the non-Muslim, despite being the caliph and a companion of the Prophet. He said, "Justice is blind to religion. Truth stands above all." That story shook something in me. So I went to HR, clarified the facts, and supported my colleague's promotion. It wasn't easy. I faced passive backlash. Some colleagues accused me of being too righteous or trying to stand out. But I kept remembering what David had said. Character is doing the right thing when it's not popular, when it's lonely. And then he shared one more story from Christianity. He told me about the woman caught in adultery, whom a crowd wanted to stone. Jesus said, "Let him who is without sin cast the first stone." Everyone dropped their stones. That wasn't just mercy, it was justice wrapped in grace. David smiled as he added, "Real justice sees the human before the mistake." That example helped me see that being just wasn't just about fairness. It was about restoring dignity. It was about seeing people as sacred. And when we do that, our faith becomes more than belief. It becomes a force of change. Step 4. Compassion as a core pillar. David once told me about Umar ibn al-Khattab, the second caliph of Islam. Known for his firmness, yet one night he wandered the streets and heard children crying from hunger. Their mother was boiling water and stones to comfort them, pretending food was coming. Umar wept, carried a sack of grain himself, and cooked for the family with his own hands. David said, "That's leadership. That's character." So I started volunteering weekly at a shelter. Not to post on social media, just to be useful. Each smile I saw felt like a prayer answered. But I realized something deeper. Compassion didn't only belong in shelters. It was needed in boardrooms, in traffic, in how I spoke to my siblings, in how I treated myself. One day, I saw a man yelling at a cashier. My instinct was to walk past, not get involved. But I remembered David's words. Compassion is inconvenient. That's what makes it divine. So I stepped in, gently calmed the man down, and asked if he was okay. He broke into tears. He'd just lost his job. We sat at a nearby bench. I listened. I didn't offer advice. I just let him speak. A week later, he showed up at the shelter where I volunteered. He said, "You reminded me people still care. I want to do the same." David later told me about St. Francis of Assisi, who embraced lepers and rebuilt homes with his own hands, despite his noble background. Compassion isn't just feeling, he said. It's the will to suffer with others until they rise. That night, I wrote in my journal, "When I love others, I feel closer to God." Maybe that's what religion was always meant to be. Step 5. Consistency in character. It's easy to act right once, harder to do it always. That's what David warned me. Character, he said, is what you repeat. He shared a story of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who used to visit an old woman who hated him. Every day, she threw garbage on his head. He said nothing, never retaliated. One day, she didn't appear. So he knocked on her door. She was sick, and he, the man she despised, brought her food and cared for her. She cried. She embraced Islam not from a debate, but from his consistency. I wanted that kind of strength. So I started tracking my behaviors. Was I kind every day? Or only on Fridays? Was I honest when no one was watching? Did I speak with grace under pressure? When I faltered, I reminded myself that even prophets had moments of despair. But they got up again. David also shared the story of Job, Ayub, peace be upon him, a figure honored in both Islam and Christianity. Job lost everything, his wealth, health, even family. Yet he remained steadfast. He didn't curse God. He didn't lash out. He endured, and in doing so, became the embodiment of consistent faith and character. That consistency became my compass, and as I kept at it, I noticed people around me change. My brother, once distant, started calling more. My team at work became more cohesive. Even strangers responded differently, as if kindness whispered something ancient to them. I saw how consistent character isn't just self-help, it's social healing. When one person becomes better, everyone around them rises. And that's when David's words hit me in full. Your character is your religion, not the label, not the ritual, but the way you show up, day after day, choice after choice. Step 6. Patience in provocation. I had always prided myself on being a patient person. At least, that's what I like to tell myself. But when it came down to it, I realized that my patience had its limits. Like most people, I could hold my composure in calm circumstances, but when provoked, all of that seemed to evaporate. It was one of those moments that made me reflect on the true nature of patience. It happened during a meeting at work. A colleague who had a habit of interrupting others started criticizing my ideas without cause. She dismissed everything I said, even though I had done my best to approach the subject with a solution-oriented mindset. My heart started racing, and I could feel the anger bubbling up inside of me. My first instinct was to snap back, to defend myself, to show her that I was right. I felt justified. After all, she had been rude, and it seemed only fair to stand my ground. But then, I remembered something David had said earlier. Patience is not about passive endurance. It's about active restraint. It's about being in control of your reactions, not just your circumstances. That thought hit me like a jolt of electricity. Patience wasn't about silently suffering when provoked. It was about responding with grace, with composure, despite the temptation to react in anger. It was about choosing how to respond, not just how to endure. David had shared a story with me from the life of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that resonated deeply. One day, a man came to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and insulted him. The Prophet, instead of retaliating or arguing, simply remained calm and quiet. He responded with compassion, offering the man food and water. It was said that the man who had come to ridicule left with respect and admiration for the Prophet's patience. That's the power of patience, David had explained. When you remain calm in the face of provocation, you break the cycle of anger and resentment. You have the ability to change the situation, not by force, but by grace. I could feel my breath steadying. As I remembered these words, I took a deep breath, and instead of raising my voice or getting defensive, I calmly said, I see your point, but I think we might be looking at this from different angles. Let's explore it further. It wasn't easy. My heart was still pounding, but I focused on keeping my tone measured, on not letting my emotions dictate my response. To my surprise, the conversation shifted. My colleague, seeing that I wasn't going to engage in an argument, softened her approach. We were able to discuss the matter more constructively. But that moment wasn't just about winning a conversation. It was about winning over my own impulse to react. It was about choosing a different path, a path of restraint that aligned with the character I was trying to build. Later that day, David shared another powerful example from the Bible about Jesus Christ, who was mocked and persecuted before his crucifixion. Despite the cruelty, he remained silent and forgave those who harmed him. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do, Jesus said, embodying the highest form of patience and mercy. David smiled as he recounted the story. Patience is not just about controlling your emotions. It's about embodying compassion for others, even when they don't deserve it. I was learning that patience wasn't passive. It required strength, an inner fortitude to stay grounded in moments of provocation, to respond with wisdom rather than reacting with emotion. That was the real challenge. It wasn't just about tolerating what others threw at you. It was about remaining true to your character, maintaining your integrity, and not allowing external circumstances to define how you acted. This lesson was put to the test again a few weeks later. Another colleague whom I had helped before started spreading rumors about me. At first, I was devastated. The natural instinct was to confront her, to clear my name, to show her how wrong she was. But instead, I chose to remain patient. I decided not to give in to the temptation of anger or resentment. I kept focused on my work and responded with kindness when we spoke, even though she had wronged me. I kept in mind what David had told me. You don't change others by battling them. You change them by showing them a better way. As the days went on, something remarkable happened. My other colleagues started noticing the difference in how I handled the situation. Instead of engaging in gossip or drama, I focused on doing my best work, on staying true to my values. Slowly, the rumors died down, and people began to respect me even more for my ability to maintain my composure under pressure. David's words echoed in my mind. Patience is your power. It's the ability to remain true to your character when the world tries to provoke you into losing it. I realized that patience was not a passive act of enduring. It was an active choice to control my reactions and stay aligned with my values. It was a practice that required constant effort, but it brought incredible rewards. Not only did I feel at peace with myself, but I also earned the respect of others who saw my ability to stay calm, even in the face of adversity. David had once told me that patience is the highest form of strength. He shared the story of the ancient philosopher Socrates, who remained composed and even forgiving when faced with personal attacks and public humiliation. Socrates' ability to stay grounded and calm in his convictions led others to admire his wisdom and strength. Patience, David said, is the antidote to anger, the key to inner peace. And when you master it, you change the world, not by force, but by grace. The more I practiced this, the more I saw the truth in his words. Patience wasn't just a virtue, it was a way of life. It allowed me to navigate conflict with clarity, to maintain my integrity in the face of challenge, and to inspire others with my ability to remain grounded, no matter the provocation. That day, I learned that patience wasn't just a reaction. It was a way of shaping the world around me. And when I could stay calm in the face of provocation, I not only built my own character, but I also created an environment where peace and understanding could thrive. As I continued on my journey, I found that patience became less of a challenge. It became second nature. And with it, I realized that I was building the kind of character I had always aspired to, one that was grounded, unwavering, and full of grace. Patience was no longer just a lesson. It was a way of being, a true reflection of the character I was developing. Step 7. Consistency in private one. Afternoon, David looked at me and asked, "Who are you when you're absolutely alone?" I didn't answer right away, because it was the hardest question. He continued, "The real test of character is not what you do on a stage. It's who you are in the quiet, when the curtains are closed and no one is watching." That struck me hard. He told me about the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who used to weep in prayer at night, seeking forgiveness and closeness to God, even though He was promised paradise, not for show, but because he wanted to remain humble, to remember his need for God. He also mentioned the story of the widow's mite from Christianity, where Jesus observed a poor widow donating just 2 small coins to the temple treasury. Others had donated large sums, but Jesus said she gave more than all of them, because she gave from the little she had, and did so privately, without recognition. Real character, David said, is not about what you do when the lights are on. It's about the choices you make in the dark. So I began examining my private life. Was I still kind in my thoughts? Did I pray to connect, or just to fulfill a duty? Did I scroll social media with envy or gratitude? Did I honor my responsibilities when there was no applause? I began waking up earlier, not to post about it, but to sit in silence, reflect, and realign my intentions. I started journaling my private victories, forgiving someone in my heart, choosing not to gossip, deleting messages I didn't need to send, and slowly, my inner life began to feel clean. I remember one night vividly. I had the opportunity to bend a rule for personal gain. No one would have known. I stared at my screen for several minutes, heart racing. Then, I closed the tab. That night, I slept like a child. David smiled when I told him. That, he said, is your soul remembering who it is. Step 8. Forgiveness over fury. David once shared a story from the life of Prophet Muhammad, PBUH, that struck me deeply. It was about a time when the Prophet was mocked and insulted by the people of Taif. They threw stones at him, pelting his body with their cruelty. His feet were bloodied, and he was bruised from head to toe. But despite the pain, he didn't respond with fury or retaliation. Instead, when given the chance to invoke a curse on his tormentors, he chose mercy. Perhaps, he said, their descendants will accept the message of Islam. David leaned in as he told me, forgiveness is not just a noble trait. It's a superpower. You see, when we hold on to anger, we imprison ourselves. Forgiveness frees the soul. I'd always believed that holding on to grudges made me strong. I had been wronged, so why should I forgive? It felt like an injustice, like I was allowing the wrongdoer to get away with their actions. But as I listened to David, a new perspective began to take root. I remembered a time in my life when I'd been hurt by a close friend. They had betrayed my trust in a way that felt like a deep wound. I carried the weight of that betrayal for months, letting it dictate my mood, my actions, and even my relationships. I justified my anger, holding on to it like a badge of honor, thinking that somehow it made me strong or right. But it wasn't until I allowed myself to let go that I realized the true power of forgiveness. It was as if a weight had been lifted from my chest, and for the first time, I could breathe freely again. David's words continued to echo in my mind as I moved through life. Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean excusing the harm that was done. It means you are choosing to release yourself from the grip of bitterness and resentment. I decided to apply this lesson to my workplace. One of my colleagues had consistently undermined my ideas in meetings, often taking credit for my work. I had grown resentful, holding on to each instance, letting it build up over time. But as I thought about forgiveness, I realized I was only hurting myself by allowing that resentment to fester. I took a deep breath and let go of the anger. The next time it happened, I didn't respond with frustration. Instead, I calmly addressed the situation with my colleague, expressing how I felt, but doing so with grace, not aggression. To my surprise, this approach led to a productive conversation and even improved our working relationship. I didn't have to retaliate or hold a grudge. Instead, I forgave, not just the other person, but myself as well. David shared another example from the Christian tradition, the story of Jesus forgiving those who crucified him. As he hung on the cross, Jesus prayed, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." David explained, "That's the kind of forgiveness we are called to, not a selective kind that only applies to people we like, but a radical, unconditional forgiveness that transforms us from the inside out." In my own life, choosing forgiveness didn't just mean letting go of anger, it meant reclaiming my peace. Each time I forgave, I became less and less bound by the actions of others. I realized that my happiness and sense of peace were my responsibility, not dependent on how others treated me. Forgiveness, I learned, wasn't just about the other person. It was about me. It was about my growth, my peace, and my ability to be the best version of myself, no matter the circumstances. And just as the Prophet Muhammad, PBUH, showed mercy to his enemies, and Jesus forgave those who wronged him, I too began to feel that power within me. As I embraced forgiveness, I felt lighter, freer, and more connected to my true self. I saw how forgiveness was not a sign of weakness, but of strength, a quiet strength that had the power to heal not only me, but those around me. Through forgiveness, I was learning to become the person I had always aspired to be, strong in character, compassionate in action, and unshakable in my faith. Step 9. Generosity without recognition. As I grew in my understanding of character, one lesson began to stand out more than the rest: generosity without expectation. I had always believed in charity, but only in the sense of what I could show others. Giving to those in need felt good, especially when I could talk about it later or share the story with friends. But real generosity, the kind that truly shapes a person, isn't about the applause or acknowledgement you receive. It's about what you give without anyone knowing. David once told me a story about the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that illuminated this lesson. There was a time when the Prophet, PBUH, would walk through the streets of Medina, and as he did, he would often find someone in need: an elderly person struggling with heavy bags, a child without shoes, or a family in desperate need of food. He didn't wait for anyone to ask him for help. He simply gave, quietly, humbly, without ever needing recognition. One of the most remarkable things about him was that he would even give away the last of his food or the very clothes on his back if someone needed it. David shared another story, this time from the life of Saint Teresa of Calcutta, who is known for her work with the poor in India. Teresa once said, "If you can't feed 100 people, then feed just one." The beauty of her words wasn't in the quantity of food given, but in the quality of the care and attention she gave in each act of kindness, no matter how small. Her life became a testament to giving without seeking any reward. She lived by the idea that true generosity lies in serving others, quietly, without expecting a return. These stories deeply moved me, and I began to reflect on my own acts of charity. Was I giving with an agenda, hoping that my kindness would be seen and praised? Or was I giving because it was the right thing to do, because my character demanded it, even if no one ever found out? I decided to put this lesson into practice. The next time I saw a homeless man on the street, I didn't wait for someone else to do it. I quietly handed him a few bills and walked away without a word. There was no thank you, no acknowledgement. And yet something changed inside me. For the first time, I realized that the act of giving without recognition allowed me to experience a joy that wasn't tainted by pride or desire for validation. It felt pure. Over time, I began to incorporate this kind of generosity into my daily life. I started doing small acts of kindness without expecting anything in return. Paying for someone's coffee anonymously, offering help without expecting thanks, or volunteering without telling anyone. These acts of service felt incredibly rewarding in ways I had never experienced before. I no longer needed others to recognize my generosity to feel fulfilled. I also remembered the teachings from the Christian tradition, where Jesus emphasized the value of doing good deeds in secret. He said, "When you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing." The meaning behind this was clear. True generosity is selfless. It's not about the praise or acknowledgement we receive. It's about the good we do in the world, regardless of whether others see it. By giving in this way, we cultivate a spirit of humility and strengthen our character. As I became more consistent with these acts, I saw the impact on my own life and the lives of those around me. People began to treat me differently, not because I wanted recognition, but because my actions reflected a deeper kind of authenticity and sincerity. I didn't need anyone to praise me for my kindness, because I knew that every act of giving, no matter how small, was making a difference in the world. David's teachings had truly transformed my approach to generosity. No longer was I focused on the outcome of my giving. The joy came not from seeing others praise me, but from knowing that I had made a positive impact, no matter how invisible it seemed. True generosity, I realized, isn't about grand gestures. It's in the quiet, unseen acts that make the world a better place. And just as the Prophet Muhammad, PBUH, and Saint Teresa showed, the more we give without expecting anything in return, the more our hearts expand. We become richer, not in material wealth, but in the wealth of the soul. Generosity becomes an act of love, an extension of who we are at our core. As I reflected on this, I realized that it wasn't just about what I gave. It was about the intention behind it. It was about giving not to be seen, but to truly help others, and to build a character that reflected the values I held dear. Step 10. Seeking knowledge to grow. I had always thought that the pursuit of knowledge was only for intellectual growth, something you did to earn a degree, get a job, or improve your status in life. But David opened my eyes to a deeper and more profound truth. Knowledge, especially the kind that shapes your character, is a lifelong pursuit that never stops and is essential for personal growth. He once shared a powerful example from the life of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. David said, "The Prophet didn't just teach through words, he taught through action. And he sought knowledge relentlessly, not just about religion, but about everything that could benefit society." I had never thought of it that way. The Prophet, PBUH, didn't just confine himself to the teachings of the Quran. He also learned from the people around him, from his companions, and even from his enemies. He was known to ask questions, to seek guidance, and to engage in dialogue. He had a thirst for knowledge, and it wasn't just for the sake of personal achievement or recognition. It was for the betterment of the community and the growth of his character. David also told me about the famous scholar Ibn Sina, also known as Avicenna, who was not only a medical genius, but a philosopher. Ibn Sina had an unquenchable thirst for knowledge, studying not only religious texts, but also science, medicine, and mathematics. His intellectual curiosity and relentless pursuit of learning made him one of the most influential thinkers in history. Knowledge is not just the tool, David told me, it's a path to becoming a better person. When you seek knowledge with the right intentions, it will naturally refine your character. It teaches you humility, patience, and perspective. At first, I didn't fully understand how this could impact my personal growth, but over time, I began to see the profound effect it had. I started to read more, not just books on religion, but also philosophy, psychology, and history. I began to ask myself deeper questions, challenging my own assumptions and seeking understanding from those around me. I wasn't just trying to fill my head with facts. I was trying to transform my heart and mind into something better. The more I learned, the more I realized how much I didn't know. This humility, this recognition of my own limitations, was something that truly began to shape my character. It reminded me of the words of Socrates, who said, "I am the wisest man alive, for I know one thing, and that is that I know nothing." This pursuit of knowledge didn't just apply to books. I also started seeking wisdom from the people around me. I asked David about his own experiences, the mistakes he had made, and the lessons he had learned. I found that when I approached others with a genuine desire to learn, it created deeper connections. I stopped seeing people as either ahead of me or behind me. I saw them as potential sources of wisdom. I also realized the importance of spiritual knowledge. In Islam, the pursuit of knowledge is highly revered. The first word revealed to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was Iqra, meaning read. In Christianity, Jesus also spoke of the importance of understanding and wisdom, saying, "The truth will set you free." These spiritual teachings underscored the idea that true growth comes from both worldly and divine knowledge. David told me that this quest for knowledge was not just for personal enrichment. It was for the enrichment of society. Knowledge, he said, is meant to be shared. It's meant to be applied to the world around you. A person who learns and keeps their knowledge to themselves is like a tree that never bears fruit. But when you share what you've learned, you become a source of nourishment for others. I took these words to heart. I started applying what I had learned to my work, my relationships, and my community. Whether it was offering advice to a colleague, sharing a book recommendation, or helping a friend with a problem, I began to see how knowledge, when used for the right reasons, could make a real difference in the world. The more I embraced learning, the more I realized that the process of seeking knowledge itself was shaping my character. It taught me patience, discipline, and the ability to see the world through different perspectives. It helped me become less judgmental and more understanding of others' experiences. Through this process, I began to realize that learning was not just about acquiring facts. It was about developing the wisdom to apply those facts in a way that brought about positive change. Knowledge, when sought with the right intention, didn't just make me smarter, it made me a better person. It gave me the tools to navigate life's challenges with grace and resilience. David's words echoed in my mind. True knowledge is the knowledge that brings you closer to becoming the person you are meant to be. So, I made a commitment to continue seeking knowledge, whether it was through reading, reflecting, or conversing with others. I learned that this pursuit didn't have a finish line. It was a lifelong journey that would continue to shape my character in ways I couldn't yet fully understand. As I embraced this step, I found myself not only growing as a person, but also finding new ways to contribute to the world around me. Whether it was mentoring others, sharing what I had learned, or simply applying my knowledge in everyday situations, I began to see how the pursuit of knowledge was a way of serving others and enriching my own soul. I learned that ultimately, knowledge is not just about what you know. It's about how you use what you know to live with greater integrity, empathy, and wisdom. And in that process, I found that the power of knowledge became an essential tool in my journey of self-improvement and spiritual growth. Step 11. Inspiring others through example. I had learned so much on my journey, but one of the most profound lessons David imparted to me was that the ultimate test of character is not how well you live your life. It's how your life inspires others to live better. It's easy to talk about values, to preach righteousness, to claim that your character is solid. But it's only when you live those values consistently, when you embody what you believe, that you truly inspire others. David often shared stories of individuals who changed the world, not through grand speeches or acts of fame, but through their quiet, consistent example. One story he shared came from the life of Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi was a man who led India to independence, but he didn't do it through violence or force. He did it through his personal commitment to non-violence, humility, and truth. He lived by his principles so intensely that they became his very essence, and it was that authenticity that drew millions of people to follow his lead. You see, what makes someone influential is not what they say, but what they do. David told me, "Character isn't a message you preach, it's a life you live." That idea had always been hard for me to understand. I had been focused on outward appearances, trying to do the right thing in public. But David's words made me realize that the real test of my character wasn't in the accolades I received or the praises I heard. It was in how my actions inspired others to act with kindness, courage, and integrity. As I reflected on this, I remembered something from the Bible, an example that stayed with me for a long time. Jesus, in his teachings, emphasized the importance of humility and service to others. He didn't simply tell people to love their neighbors. He demonstrated it by washing the feet of his disciples, performing humble acts of service. Through his example, he inspired others to live with love and humility, to sacrifice their own comforts for the greater good. Similarly, in Islam, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, embodied all of the virtues he preached. His life was a living example of mercy, kindness, and integrity. His character was so compelling that it didn't matter where you came from or what religion you followed. People were drawn to his example. So, I set out to live by these lessons. I began to focus on the small, consistent actions that reflected my character, no longer seeking validation or recognition. Instead, I simply did what I believed was right, quietly, humbly, and without expectation of praise. I remember a particular day when I was having a rough time at work. It had been a long week, and I was feeling frustrated and exhausted. I was about to snap at a colleague for a mistake when I remembered something David had said. True strength lies in how you respond when you're at your weakest. I took a deep breath, walked over to my colleague, and calmly explained the mistake without judgment. She looked at me, surprised, and thanked me. I could tell that something had shifted in her, even in that small interaction. She had expected a confrontation, but instead, she was met with understanding. Later, to my surprise, she told others about how I had handled the situation with patience and kindness. She was inspired by my example, and soon enough, I noticed that her own demeanor began to change. She was more calm, more composed, and started treating others with the same patience I had shown her. It wasn't just my actions that changed her. It was the character I displayed through those actions. David later told me about a story from ancient times where a leader would always strive to show strength through his kindness. He shared the example of King Cyrus of Persia, who was known for his just rule. But what made Cyrus truly remarkable wasn't just his political power, it was his personal integrity. He led by example, showing mercy even to his enemies, and that compassion earned him the loyalty of his people and respect from others. People will remember you, David said, not for your words, but for your actions. The way you live is the greatest message you can send. It struck me that the example I set every day had the potential to ripple outward in ways I couldn't always predict. I wasn't just shaping my own character. I was affecting the people around me. They were watching. They were learning. And in some small way, my example could make the world a better place. The more I lived with integrity, the more I began to notice how others around me started adopting similar values. A colleague I had once seen as selfish started offering to help others more. A neighbor, who had always been a bit aloof, began engaging in small acts of kindness. It was as though my actions were sparking something in them, a recognition that living with character wasn't just possible, it was powerful. This transformation wasn't just happening in the workplace or in my personal life. It began to extend outward. One evening, I was having dinner with my family when my younger brother, who had always been somewhat rebellious, turned to me and said, "You know, I've been watching you lately, the way you treat people, especially when no one is looking. It's like you really believe in what you say." His words were humbling. I hadn't set out to change his perspective, but my actions had spoken louder than any sermon I could have preached. He was inspired not by what I said, but by what I did. And that, to me, was the ultimate validation. It wasn't about accolades or public recognition. It was about inspiring change through personal example. David had once said that your true impact isn't measured by the applause you receive. It's measured by the lives you touch and the ripples you create. Those words now resonated deeply with me. I saw how one small act of integrity, one decision to live with kindness, could create a chain reaction that spread far beyond my own life. Now, I focused not on what I could achieve, but on how I could inspire others through the consistency of my actions. I understood that the most profound impact we can have on this world is to live our values authentically and to allow others to see the change that is possible when we lead with character. My journey wasn't just about personal growth anymore. It was about creating a legacy of integrity that could inspire those around me to do the same. In the end, the greatest test of my character became not how well I could follow the rules, but how well I could inspire others to rise, to live with integrity, and to cultivate the character that truly mattered. And that was the most fulfilling part of this entire journey. The realization that by changing myself, I had started to change the world, one small example at a time. Final reflection. I look in the mirror now and ask myself, not, did I pray enough? But was I honest? Was I kind? Did I lift someone today? Because character is a real religion. And if we all live that truth, the world wouldn't just change, it would heal. So if you're lost in rituals, pause. Ask who you're becoming. And remember, the path to God often begins with being good and God consciousness. Be the kind of person whose character becomes a prayer in motion. Because in the end, when the books are closed and the titles fade, what remains is how you made others feel. And that, truly, is the face of faith. In the end, always keep in mind, pretending to be something you're not won't yield lasting outcomes.